Welcome to the Rideshare Guy podcast, where you will learn about the rideshare and mobility industry straight from Harry Campbell, who's got over 5 years experience covering the industry and has talked to thousands of drivers. There's no better place to stay up to date, entertained, and educated. So let's dive in.
So Marc Gorlin is the founder and CEO of Roadie, the nation's first on-the-way crowdsourced delivery platform. Roadie is an easy, flexible tool for drivers to earn cash in a way that fits their lifestyles. With a community of more than 200,000 drivers, Roadie's delivery footprint covers 90% of U.S. households. Roadie works with consumers, small businesses, and corporations to provide a faster, cheaper, more scalable solution for scheduled, same-day, and urgent delivery. So I'm excited to chat with you today, Marc. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you, Harry.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's good to talk to you. And, I'm really curious to learn more about Roadie because, as I mentioned in the bio, you've got a couple 100,000 drivers. You cover 90% of the U.S. household. Before we kind of get the details about what Roadie is and how it works, I'm curious, how do you see yourselves fitting into the overall mobility, transportation, logistics space? I'm assuming you don't consider yourself a ride-hail company, but I'm curious how you see yourself as Roadie fitting into that.
We sort of see ourselves as a side hustle to other people that have a side hustle. There's some pretty definitive differences with Roadie when you look across like rideshare, and probably the biggest one is the flexibility and transparency that we have with drivers coming in. When you look at our driver network, it's you might have a couple 100,000 drivers, but you might have 100,000 more if you look back a year because people go in and out. We're okay with episodic use, and we're not pushing people to be delivering 8 hours a day. It's not like their taxi light is on and they need to keep doing it. But if it's convenient, ideally, the North Star where it came from, if they're heading in one direction already, which is near the pickup point, and they're going there, they can pick it up and make money heading home. Yeah. And often the frictional cost of that is a lot less than a net new delivery because they're already heading in that direction.
Yeah. So I think that kind of, where I want to start is really how you came up with the idea, because I think this concept of basically making money while you're on the way to already going somewhere or already doing something is like, I'm an engineer before this career. And so anything where you can, use leverage or be more efficient, right? That's really stuff that excites me. So I think when I first heard about Roadie, that was kind of really what, stood out to me. So tell me a little bit about the origin story and how you came up with the idea for Roadie in the first place.
Absolutely. And you're right. You're essentially pulling all the frictional cost out of a delivery if you're sort of, hitchhiking with somebody that's already going that way anyway. So I live in Atlanta. I have a condo down in Perdido Key, Florida on the Gulf Coast between Pensacola and Orange Beach. And when this condo was developed, we found out that the developer didn't put pans underneath the master bathroom shower in one of the units, and somebody's leaked into 6 units. Huge pain in the ass, big mess. So everybody was on their own to fix their unit. So I decided to make mine nicer and put tile up. So it was tile day, Thursday, February of 2014. Driving down the beach, get to Montgomery, Alabama, have lunch, get back in the truck, and I get a call from Glenn, the tile guy. Now Glenn's from UCLA, if you know where that is.
I live right next to UCLA, so
it's a different UCLA here. It's actually upper corner of Lower Alabama, and he doesn't probably talk.
I was about to say
anybody.
This tile guy might be a little far away.
Yeah, it was a long distance job. No, he lives in the upper corner of Lower Alabama. He doesn't talk like most of the people in your UCLA. And the call literally goes like this. He's like, "Hey, Mark, this is Glenn. That bullnose tile done shown up broken and shit. Ain't gonna be here till overnight delivery, which is on Monday." I'm like, "Oh, please." I was like, "Overnight deliveries Friday." I'm going to get nowhere with Glenn. So I said, "Where's the tile?" He said, "I think it's in Birmingham, which is about an hour and a half north of Montgomery." I said, "Find out." I hang up, a little ticked off, and I'm sitting at the overpass of I-65 in Montgomery, Alabama. I look left, and I see all these cars going south. I look right, and I see all these cars going north. And I think to myself, there's bound to be somebody leaving Birmingham right now heading to Montgomery. If I just knew who they were, surely they throw a box of tile in their trunk. I give them $20. They're coming this way anyway. It's probably someone going all the way down to the beach. And I could be a couple Coronas in by the time they got down there. Yeah. And that's where it hit me that there's this unbelievable untapped natural resource, probably the most sustainable thing I'd ever could imagine, more vehicles than UPS, FedEx, USPS, and every courier you could slap together combined.
Yeah.
Which is all of us. 250 million passenger vehicles hit the road every day with 4 billion cubic feet of excess capacity. And I just asked, what would happen if you put some of that wasted space to use? And that's how it came up with Roadie, which matches up big businesses, small businesses, and you and me as consumers with stuff to send with drivers that are heading in the right direction. And every time I tell the tile story, somebody tells it back to me. A kid jersey that need to be brought across town, a couch to your sister's house, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Yeah. Well, I think this concept of, sort of basically leveraging already underutilized assets or routes or whatever it may be has been around for a while, right? I remember people would go back on Craigslist and they would look for people carpooling, right? I can't remember what the section on Craigslist was, but it was like carpools,
the
right?
old bulletin boards. We did it.
Yeah.
We did it in college. Like, I got an extra seat down in New Orleans. Do you want to go? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In the Bay Area, there's a cool, I believe they call it casual carpool, right? It's like people who are already crossing the bridge. If you go in with them, then they can ride in the carpool lane. And so you guys can save money on the tolls, get there a little faster. And it's literally just totally casual. And people wait in line and do it, right? So it's sort of like this leveraging of people that are already going in a certain direction or a certain way. So I think that concept is really cool. I guess the challenge that a lot of these, we're talking Craigslist here, right? We're talking casual carpool is how do you commercialize this and make it into a huge, successful, and I would even take that one step further, VC funded business, right? Because you guys have raised money and have sort of gone down that path, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a minute. I mean, Roadie is sort of like a Airbnb, UPS, and eBay all spun together in a bucket. So with any marketplace, you sort of have to pick a side and figure it out. And we picked up drivers at first and trying to look to that North Star. We were at hundreds, and I mean, we gave away 300,000 of these T-shirts I'm wearing or more at football games, NASCAR races, places where people constantly go from point to point to get them going. Like everybody else, I mean, we're sending our own stuff around, trying to figure out how do you build up, that demand side. And our first break, I mean, Delta Airlines was actually our Amazon books, if you will. Like they, because it didn't like wreck the whole concept. I mean, you think about the airlines in every airport in the country, big and small, are constantly trying to get bags, reunited with passengers in the adjoining neighborhoods and communities. Why can't the pilots, passengers, flight attendants, bag handlers, the dude that works at Hertz, the lady works at Burger King, this whole community of people that are constantly at the airport, you just attach a package to them going out into the same communities they're going to anyway. Yeah. I love it. I've been, last time I was in San Francisco, it's been a minute, with our past year, but there was a guy that worked as a ticket agent at Delta, and I had my shirt on. I said, "Do you work at Roadie?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Why?" He goes, "I love it." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I live in San Jose. And, once or twice a week, a bag's heading to San Jose when I'm getting off work. So I get paid to go home." Yeah. I'm like, that is awesome.
Yeah. So there's a feature on the Uber driver app called the destination filter. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically the same concept that you set a destination, and they've even, spiced it up a little over the years where you can also add an arrival time and things like that. And basically the idea doesn't always work so well in real life is that you only get trips headed in the direction that you're going, right? So drivers love this feature in the mornings, they can set it into the city, or at nights, you get taken, God knows where. And then at the end of the night, you set your destination as your home, and you only get trips headed in that direction. So, and I actually did an experiment once where every time I left my house in the city of LA for a couple months, for more casual personal meetings, whatever it might be, I used the destination filter to get where I was going, right? And I wouldn't catch a trip every time, but it was very surprising to me how little out of the way I went, or how much little extra time there was. And, I might make only $7 on my way to a lunch meeting, but it was only 4 minutes out of the way, right? And 60 divided by 4, I haven't had my coffee yet, but it's some sort of multiple times 7. I'm trying to do the math right now. Let's see, I guess that would be 15 times $7, right? So you're at an hourly rate, you're making $105 per hour, even though you're only working 7 minutes. So I think this concept, I'm curious, kind of how it works on the driver's side and how they think about it, right? Whether it's, you talked about like the part-time work versus full-time, is it sustainable, or how are people like actually using this service Roadie in real life?
Yeah, I mean, there's a mix. I mean, there's a group of people that, we work with a lot of big retailers, so Walmart and Best Buy and Tractor Supply and most of the airlines and Home Depot, and Home Depot's an investor in us. So in those types of settings, you often create this sort of delivery mechanism where the employees, their families, the people that shop there, and the surrounding communities become this this group of drivers and this deliverability for each sort of store everywhere. And in those situations, you see it. We have regular rideshare drivers. They're on Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, and everywhere else. They're certainly on the platform as well. And those are great. I think the big distinction that you see in people, they tend to pay a little bit more overall because, we have Priuses and we have pickup trucks. So our drivers deliver cupcakes and they deliver couches. So some obviously pay a little bit more than others. But
hopefully the couch pays a bit more than the cupcakes.
It pays it pays a little bit more and doesn't get smushed quite as easily.
Yeah.
But the thing is like the control the drivers have. With other apps, by and large, your taxi light's on and go pick up a sandwich and take it to Harry. Go pick up Harry and take him to this address. With Roadie, you see your gig card on there and say, okay, there's a drill leaving Home Depot. It needs to go to Harry's house. He's at 123 Main Street. It needs to be there by 4 p.m. And you get paid $10. It needs to be there. Do you want to do it? And drivers raise their hand. Our system can look through ratings, reviews, who's closest, who has the best opportunity to hit the SLAs that are required for the customer. And they choose whether they want to offer on it. And oftentimes you have a lot of folks picking on it, and it allows you to pick the best driver, but also one with the lowest frictional cost. The added benefit to what our drivers would get which is super cool because in the history of logistics, oftentimes, whether you're UPS or you're Macy's, when the truck leaves the dock, you can't put other stuff on it. You can't add things to routes like that. But here, if you've picked up from a flower shop and that very same Home Depot drill shows up, you can literally like you be offered, hey, we know you're already heading to take these flowers. Would you like to pick up this drill on the way you're already going? And you start to see some of the rates like what you're talking about, because your frictional cost is nothing if the depot's next to the flower shop.
Yeah. So you've talked a bit about business and personal use on the customer side. What does the business break down like on the Roadie side? I mean, are most of your customers, are they personal? Are they businesses? How does that break down? And how do you think about the two differences, categories of the customer?
Sure. I mean, this is my 5th startup. So often it's a journey and you wind up with anchor tenants first. And if you're doing it right, you sort of swap out those anchor tenants over time as you broaden your base. So like I said, Delta was sort of our first, but we're majority big retail names, we're delivering for, like I said, the Walmarts, those Best Buys and so forth. And mid-market, you think HVAC companies and things like that. We are moving quickly into, small and medium-sized businesses. But to do that, you sort of have to have that density or deliverability everywhere to do it. So the cool thing about Roadie is you have drivers in Atlanta, you have drivers in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then everywhere in between, they go between. They aren't just set in these places. People move. So all of a sudden, Greenville and Spartanburg and everywhere becomes deliverable as well, which is super cool because we're not sure we're good in Atlanta, we're good in Philadelphia, we're good in all these big NFL cities. But we're also good in Eugene, Oregon, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and all the spaces in between. Like an example, Columbia, South Carolina is our 3rd overall market in gig volume because we do so much with bigger retailers and stuff there. So you can really give small mom and pops the ability to compete with the Amazons out there and all that. Especially you think about last year, we were delivering flowers for flower shops from people's homes because they weren't allowed to open for business.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a key word that I think you said density, right? And I think with a service like this, density really matters, right? The situation you describe, right? A Walmart, for example, if they're one of your key partners in one of these cities, and then they've got, probably hundreds, if not thousands of employees coming in and out of the building every day, doing all sorts of different jobs. And those are potential drivers. So again, right, you've got this cluster, now you have density, right? So it's easier for people, you might not sign up everyone, but you sign up some of those folks and you have greater coverage of where those packages are potentially going. So I feel like, how would it work, transitioning into some of the small or medium businesses, or even on the personal side, right? It seems like it's more of a long shot, right? To find someone that happens to be, going from X A place to B place, right? The way I think of it, with carpooling apps is, some of these B2B carpooling apps that I've seen that work, they go to enterprise clients like Google that has thousands of employees, and now they're constraining one endpoint, right? It's okay, we know at point B, that's where everyone has to finish, right? It's a bunch of different points A to point B is fixed, right? And so that really, enables that density and that kind of basically that function of density to work a lot smoother. So I'm curious, like, does this model work that well, on the personal side, versus like these big businesses? Like, I totally am on board. Like, I feel like this would be a slam dunk, like at a Walmart or, some of these other places, but I'm not as sure, on some of these more like, random or one-off type opportunities.
Well, what happens are the randoms and the one-offs are in the same towns that that the Home Depots and the Walmarts are, or in rural America, the Tractor Supplies or the Advanced Auto Parts.
Yeah.
So those wind up providing the density to keep drivers activated where they're watching.
Got it.
And at that point, they don't care if they're coming to your house, which sometimes might even pay better than, corporate customers that often, get a little bit, force a little bit better pricing on all of this to make it work. So that's what's cool. I mean, to have the drivers, I mean, in our case, the example I gave you, like you have a gig being sent, there's a driver who offers. Yeah. And there might be a bunch of them. So, you got 5 drivers that might offer, one gets it. So 4 others were engaged to want to do that gig for you. Yeah. But we also have this, it's very cool, latent capacity above that, where there all these drivers opening the app, lurking on it, sort of seeing what's there. And what we found is the biggest thing that, at least in the retail segment, they care about is what happens when it flex. I have to build my delivery church for Easter Sunday. And they wind up, how do I have enough capacity there? Because take the airlines, for example, go out of retail. So if there's a big snowstorm on the Northeast and there's like 600 bags in Orlando when there might normally be 40 or 50, the incumbent model would have 4 vans come in, go north, south, east, west, and do that until 3 days later, you get your bag and your underwear back.
Got it.
Under our model, it's more like ants to an anthill. All these people who offer, don't get, and then sort of just look at what's going on. When lots of activity comes in, they sort of pounce on it. And then all of a sudden your SLAs don't really change. So even with this,
what's SLA mean?
Service level agreement, what our promise to the customer is. So you might have to get your Walmart groceries there in an hour because you've got raw chicken and ice cream. Or you might have just a full same day delivery window for an iPhone cable you've got to deliver for somebody. It just depends. It's different across.
Got it. So one thing you said that I really like is that you give a lot of information up front to the drivers. This is one thing that, I think a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers complain about. And kind of what we saw in California, Uber started giving a lot of that information to drivers, and many drivers started abusing it, basically, right? Because as you might imagine, if you've got 2 jobs to pick from, one that's really good and one that's, not as high paying, drivers naturally default, more towards, what's best for themselves. So are there any downsides to providing too much information for your drivers, or how do you sort of balance, providing them all the information they need, but still making sure that the experience is a positive one on the customer side?
Sure. That's the whole crowdsourced part, is having lots and lots of drivers, having gigs that require different vehicles, different amounts of capacity that work for everybody. So the same gig that might have worked for you where you were going on your personal errand might not work for you tomorrow if you were going somewhere else. Yeah, but it might work for somebody else. I mean, that's the real answer. The fact is, I don't want someone that doesn't want to do a gig or think it's paying too little or whatever to do it, because it might not be such a great experience. And you've got some advantages with packages. I mean, you've got a little bit more vehicle flexibility in there, and you've got the ability to consolidate them. I mean, best we can tell, packages don't care if they're in the car with other packages. Yeah, that's not the same in the human world.
Definitely.
So it's just, it is, you're just embracing that like sort of violent transparency, and then letting it sort it out. And then we figure it out if certain people don't offer. I mean, our we hit on time delivery for most of our clients 98+% of the time. So there's something about this when you think about it. So, okay, people can do it or not, and they have to offer. How in the world is this going to meet the requirements of big corporates? But when you web together people's retailers' employees with their customers, with their customers' families or employees' families in the adjoining neighborhoods, you get this web of deliverability that's often stronger and more on time than if you had a fixed asset that wouldn't have the flex, couldn't go as long. I mean, most delivery companies only want to go 5 to 10 miles because that's the only way they can handle it. We deliver more than 70 miles for most of the airlines.
Yeah. Well, so I feel like this next question is going to be a little tough and there's going to be a lot of variability, but what does the average order or payout look like? I mean, you've talked about big, you've talked about bags with Delta Airlines, you've talked about, HVAC supplies, tiles, I guess in the original story, but can you shed any light on sort of like what are drivers expecting? What are some of the averages or, kind of payouts or what are we looking at here?
Sure. Yeah, it is hard to answer because it's all over the board depending on what it is and how big it is and how far
Yeah.
it's going. So it's more like the size and the distance. But average payouts probably range from $8 to $20. You look across different gigs out there, but it can also go up into the hundreds if you were taking my tile from Atlanta down and saving me a round trip down there. So it really it's
So
going to
8 to 20, that would be for sort of an intra-city type delivery within the same city.
Yeah. I mean, we've tried very hard to keep driver pay as high as we can. But it's sort of an impossible thing with, as retailers and others wind up subsidizing deliveries to some degree. You've got to stay competitive. You can't, well, some people seem like they can, but pay more than you're actually getting paid for the deliveries. But we've always tried to balance it on the driver side.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know how you think about driver pay, right? Because if you look at other driving jobs that are sort of, like an actual job, right? You might think about it more like, I've got flexibility, but I clock on at 12 p.m. and then I'm going to drive for 4 hours or until I make $200 and then I stop. And at the end, I can sort of look back and say, okay, I worked for 4 hours and I made $160. Okay, that's pretty good. That's really good. I made $40 an hour, right? So I think that's typically how a lot of drivers, but also just generally, right? How people think, especially in frontline work, they think about their pay on an hourly basis. But, like I used in my example, right? If I only do one trip and I make $8, but it only took me 12 minutes, on my way to somewhere else. How do you think about pay and how do you think your drivers think about pay in that respect?
I think drivers think about pay more like you are. I don't know that they would take it to the math that you are your frictional cost on your trip, but I think they're thinking roughly what am I making for an hour's work or roughly what am I making per mile, depending on what it is. And deliveries different than people. If I drop you off on the wrong block, you can walk a block and get where you need to go, which is never once has a package sprouted legs and walked to where it receiving, found Bob and done what it needs to do there. So on the ones where they're complex, it is a bit more complex, making sure things are ready to go and so forth. And that's something, it's on us to keep pushing partners to make sure they're ready so drivers can zip in and zip out and it can be most efficient for them. So, I mean, usually per mile or per hour is the way we try to think about it and getting there in whatever form or fashion we can.
Yeah. Well, and I think yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, frankly, with a lot of logistics or transportation jobs, right? The easy part is driving down the street or driving down the highway or driving down the freeway, at whatever speed. It's the pickup and the drop off that's challenging, right? If you've got multiple packages. So how do you think about that in regards or what are the issues or, that kind of come up with roadies? Is it pretty simple? When they go to a Walmart, is there a special section for roadie drivers and they pick it up and then they go drop it off? Or, can you shed a little light there?
Sure. I can shed it from what I hear from drivers and I deliver gigs myself. So
that's the best way to learn, right?
It is the best way to learn. They show up and I mean, a lot of the retailers have gotten a lot better. The pandemic sort of forced this like under pressure. Everybody had their Apollo 13 moment last year where they had duct tape, spit and baling wire and made systems better. It's often operationally on, a lot of the retailer side. I mean, is what's on your e-com site really in stock at that store? Do you have enough employees to pick it in the time you say you're going to? Because delivery time is part us, but it's also part how fast can you get it ready for us and what are you promising people? So some people that might have a 4-hour SLA, 2 of it's on them just to get it picked. And you've got different challenges at stores. So a Home Depot is a much bigger store than a Best Buy. So some are faster than others. Then you wind up, and then the other is just getting it loaded into cars. If you get Walmart, which typically would have a lot of spots that people can go in, a lot of orders coming out, how fast and how many people they have to get them in cars. You don't want to sit there and wait.
Yeah.
So making the wait time is probably the biggest thing that, that are trying to reduce for our drivers, because they don't want to sit there and wait on it. And
they don't get paid during that time either, right?
Yeah. And sometimes the fact is they do. So we do everything we can to try to push the big guys to move it along. You can only push them so much, but we kick and stream a lot.
Got it. So it sounds like a lot of these orders that are being fulfilled by Roadie are same day, sort of semi on demand, or what's the sort of profile there? Are these scheduled? How does that break down?
It's all of the above. So it's same day and anywhere from a 1 hour time slot to 2 hour to just by end of day, depending on the customer. Or if, like my tile story, if you're doing your bathroom and next week and you're doing your grout, you can pre-schedule all that stuff to show up on the day, change it if you want to. So it doesn't matter to us. We can.
I call this category sooner rather than later, because you think about it, right? When you call for a ride, you obviously want to go somewhere right now, and especially, and this is one of the reasons why I think food delivery is such a challenging business, is because you have, the longer it takes for the item to arrive, the lower the quality of the product, right? Even in your case, right? If it takes 4 hours versus 2 hours, they're still getting the same tile, right? There's 100%. The integrity of the product is still 100%. So I'm really interested by these models that are sort of less time sensitive and sort of sooner rather than later, because it leaves a whole lot of room for optimization and getting better and getting faster and improving things there. So very cool. One thing I will
agree
say,
with you. People are tired of soggy fries. I think that's why you'll see probably the cloud kitchen side of things really take off there, because then at least you can make one point of departure for all the restaurants, and you can cut down that time. But that's about the only efficiencies that seem to be able to be there when people are ordering whatever they want from wherever. What were you saying?
Well, I was going to say, all right, well, you brought up cloud kitchens, not me. So I'm going to have to ask you, has Roadie thought about expanding, into quicker or more on-demand delivery, right? I'm sure you are obviously aware of these other category segments. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth in the future, whether in your own vertical or other adjacent ones?
Yeah, I mean, we've tested some models in New York where we have committed capacity. Drivers can sign up for a certain period of time and go in and out. They know exactly what they're going to get. They're going to get tips. And it almost needs to work. New York's like an alien planet. So it almost needs to work alongside our basic thing. Because I knew that what we had, it needed something else for working with a high volume grocer up there. But going forward, I'm super excited. A lot more big and bulky. Because it's really tough for a lot of retailers. So because we've got things up to cargo vans and box trucks, and figuring out, how to help more retailers do bigger stuff. So if we can do it everywhere, and then we can do your whole SKU catalog, that's helpful. And additionally, I keep thinking about what we're doing as tasks, and that one task might be that somebody's picking up something and taking it somewhere else. But I think you'll see in retail, a lot of retailers are thinking about, what is that complete delivery experience? Like, not only do I want you to bring my ceiling fan, I would love for you to put it up for me. So what if you could pair that gig with an electrician, or not just bring me the toilet, but actually install it in the house while it's there, hang the TV on the wall, whatever the case may be, but pair that up with drivers that have that sort of ability, and those sort of tasks can latch on. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and you see in other spaces, the picking and packing. That's an interesting opportunity too, because a lot of people don't necessarily want the marketplaces, taking their data, their customers, their margins over time. So there's people that are looking out. Yeah.
Well, I really like the idea actually of, sort of the complete or full delivery, right? Because it kind of reminds me of this big push we're seeing in the last mile delivery space, where everyone's kind of trying to increase the AOV, the average, order value, right? If you just get groceries, okay, how do we add on some alcohol, right? Because that's a high margin product. Or, if I order DoorDash, they give me now the option to, the driver can pick up non-perishable items from 7-Eleven along the way and increase that. And it's, easy for the driver. And that seems like a good way, again, to sort of take the drivers obviously, already there, and you kind of get to leverage a lot of the efficiencies that are already happening at scale. So I guess out of the ideas you mentioned, I like that concept the most. And it seems like we're seeing that in a lot of other last mile delivery, operations, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I think a lot of people need to put themselves in the driver's shoes and go out there and drive those gigs. The idea of picking up something where you've got hot food and then having to stop by CVS and pick up a few things so it's on the way while the food's getting cold in the car. That sounds great.
Yeah.
But to actually do that, get everything there, there's a huge line and you don't want the food to get cold. It's a lot harder than you think when you're talking about something that its value can change very much.
I think with a lot of these initial products, there's sort of more tests or pilots, but you could sort of very easily envision a future iteration where, the CVS or the 7-Eleven is obviously picking those items. So you just kind of grab and go, right? And that works very well with, again, like, sooner rather than later type items. That's why I like that phrasing versus hot food. That's sort of number one priority. So interesting. So I guess was the answer to my question a no, that you're sort of not looking as much into the on-demand, sort of like have it now, ASAP kind of food delivery or any of these other areas?
Oh, we are. I mean, we're not directly looking at like hot food now delivery, but about everything else you can imagine we are.
Got it. Any categories or sectors of delivery that you're not currently doing right now, or maybe only doing a little of, that you feel like there's like really fun and exciting or just big opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cloud kitchen part, that would be the only place I'd probably dip my toe into hot food. But the thing is, the thing that insulated us, I mean, we were, airlines went to nothing last year, but we were up about 400%. It's because we were insulated against risk because we had such a wide variety of verticals we were in. So we're in airlines, we do grocery, we do sort of home improvement, home and garden, we do prescriptions, we do flowers, we do food like bakeries and things like that. So an incredibly auto parts. So we're doing tires and cupcakes all within the same platform. So, but that diversity, which some suggested we shouldn't go that wide, I think served us well because it allows us to take advantage of, opportunities that you and I might talk about today and stuff that we hadn't thought of, but it'll show up next week.
Yeah. Well, so I think one challenge that we've seen, basically when you kind of go into the area of like on what I call like unlimited SKUs, right? Or, basically we'll deliver anything and everything, is that especially on the worker side, it's sometimes hard to reward them for the effort, right? If you have a passenger that you're taking from A to B, you can very simply pay them, per mile, per minute, and add on a waiting time charge. Okay. Sometimes taxis, if you pick someone up at the airport, you charge extra for a bag. There's only, a very, not small, but there's a limited number of iterations that can happen. And so what are the issues that you've run into, kind of like with delivering basically anything and everything? And are there certain, sort of segments that you like, well, we don't want to do that. It's not a good return on anyone's time or money.
I think the way that we solve for a lot of that, and I mean, you wind up with sometimes a car shows up or they're in a different car than they had registered, and the Prius shows up when it need to be the pickup truck and they can't take the couch. So we're getting better and better at playing Tetris with every vehicle you can imagine to know like what could fit and like what could be most efficient, not just the frictional cost of the drive, but the frictional cost of the space. But the other is like certifications and badging drivers. You need a 2-man team because somebody can't pick up a couch by themselves. You need a cooler bag because you've got to keep, the frozen shrimp frozen. You need, you might need tie downs. You might need whatever you might need, a dolly to bring something in, and making sure people understand that. I mean, for some of our B2B customers, you need PPE like gear. You need a hard hat and a vest. But if you do that, if you're willing to make that investment, you might, then all of a sudden the pool of drivers that can do that is smaller and you're going to get more gigs. So trying to offer that flexibility of a lot of different gigs out there that what people can use and let them tailor it for themselves. So I think as long as you can let people know what they require, a lot of people want to do that. They want these gigs that if you need a van, you can get 6 gigs in a route in a row. You want to get those. So that flexibility and control is super important in figuring out more ways to do that. And you do it through pay, you do it through certifications, and if we do our job, we try to get more and varying gigs on the platform, and some work for some and some work for others.
Yeah. So if folks are listening right now or maybe watching, who's your ideal driver? Like, what's your pitch to the driver? Who should come work for Roadie, and what should they expect, and what should they think about when they do come to work for Roadie?
Well, I mean, people who want to make a little extra money going where they're going
Hmm.
anyway. I mean, they're not working for Roadie, they're working for themselves and figuring out like when does it make sense for you? And you
Yeah.
could do it for a bunch of different reasons. You could do it because, you want to take some carbon out of the air and you want to get there. I mean, you talk about certifications.
Yeah.
I listened to your podcast on Haven and all
Hmm.
of the EV vehicles. You could certify that, and then companies could get carbon credits because they would
Yeah.
only use these types of drivers. That's another way where you'd certify the vehicle versus just what the person might have. The pitch is just you can make money going where you're going anyway. You can do exactly
Hmm.
what you're doing. You can help somebody out, and you can make money. And if you're a rideshare driver, we're going to give you all the control. You can
Hmm.
choose which one you want to do. You can choose if it makes sense for. If it doesn't, don't offer on it.
Yeah.
You're going to have more and more the ability to get routed and consolidated gigs, some multiples in there that will drive up your earnings per hour.
Yeah.
And you can do bigger, bulkier stuff. So maybe you might get something that's small that might not have the pay rate that you would prefer. But
Hmm.
if it's batched with a barbecue grill,
Yeah.
then everybody's winning. And that's what we're trying to get to, because
Mm.
you got to match it up where we can win a little, the driver can win a little, and
Hmm.
the retail and the end customer. It's got to sort of work for all. And I think there's been wild swings on that on all sides. So we're just trying to keep the median
Yeah.
as best we can, which sometimes we do a good job of and sometimes we don't.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that is a very compelling pitch. I would say to ride hail drivers specifically, to say, hey, you have a lot of control, because that's one thing that they lack in their current job. And I think a lot of other gig jobs, that's kind of, they lack that control, even though they're technically independent contractors. And I think for everyone else, it's sort of, make a little money, while you're driving somewhere that you're already going. I think one thing it makes me think of is a lot of these marketplace platforms, they end up, what drives a lot of the volume, a lot of the trips, a lot of the stays on Airbnb are what they call power hosts, or, with Uber and Lyft, it's power drivers, right? There's only 15 to 20% of drivers are working 30 to 40 hours a week or more full time, but they actually make up 50 to 60% of the total hours and the total trips on the platform. So how have you sort of solved that issue? Because it sounds like a lot of the drivers working for Roadie are not doing 30 to 40 hours a week. They're much more in that kind of part-time, flexible, like who kind of, like I kind of joke all the time that like, I'm like a terrible worker, right? Like I'm someone like I log on, whenever there's a good bonus for Uber, I drive a little, I sign off, I'm not very reliable. Like, I've hired people. So I'm like very, you would not want to hire me as a driver, but how do you think about that, kind of like really achieving that baseline scale?
Yeah, I mean, we've polled our drivers and did a
Mm-hmm.
survey. It's self-reported, but I mean, nearly half of them don't drive on the other services, which means half of them do.
Yeah.
So for the power users, we've got plenty of gigs, and they're growing every
Okay.
day and signing up new and new retailers and bigger ones to be able to keep feeding them all they want. And if you're feeding them more and you're paying them more,
Yeah.
the math is pretty easy, especially if they get to choose
Yeah.
per gig and then starting to put them together. It becomes a lot more compelling than whatever the minimum is they're going to get that day in that city on Uber or Lyft.
Yeah.
And I think that is the pitch. I mean, I delivered a gig a couple of weeks ago. It was a bigger item, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to another driver, and he said he got on the platform in 2015, and he got off for a while, and now he's back on. He's loading up
Yeah.
a van full of big stuff. So has he churned?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like it, but under any normal way that we might have looked at it in 2016, he could have. So being okay with episodic use, I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
Power drivers, absolutely. They'll be in there. They're doing it for money. Love them. Glad that they're there and glad that they're doing it. And they're probably doing it because we might pay a little bit more on the margins. Or they like doing packages versus people. There's a lot of those folks out there.
Definitely.
Or as this famous Uber driver in a roadie driver in Charlotte told me when we first launched the airport there. This is when I flew to all the launches, and she's like, yeah, I do. I only do roadie after 6 p.m. Only do roadie. I was like, why do you only do roadie after 6 p.m.? She was like, because bags will not puke in my car.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the attractions of packages over, well, there are a lot of attractions of packages over people, let's put it that way. So okay, for real, last question this time. You did talk about, the drivers, and you guys have seen a big increase during the pandemic, and a lot of gig companies, well, I'd say Uber and Lyft, ride hail companies specifically, are struggling right now with a driver shortage. I think food delivery companies seem to have worked it out much better. And you said something that I think is really interesting, that it can be really episodic use of Roadie, and you guys are okay with that. And I feel like I actually tweeted this out the other day, that a lot of gig companies, they're very focused on growth, and so they sort of treat some drivers, they have bad churn, and they sort of treat some drivers poorly. And then now, in a time of a labor shortage, when they really need them and they can actually pay them and offer bonuses, like I've heard from a lot of drivers, like, I don't want to go back to those guys, even though there could be this good opportunity, right? And it sounds like, I'm curious just how you think about that here with Roadie. It sounds like you've got some people coming back on the platform, and how do you sort of plant those seeds now, so that even if they do take a break for a year or two, that they might be, reliable drivers in the future?
You try to communicate with them. You try to be transparent. You tell them when new gigs or companies might sign up in cities they are going to see new gigs. You try to provide training, so you're not like throwing them into something that they've never done before. If they're doing a Walmart grocery delivery and they've never done it, we have videos that allow people to see, like, what was it like? How is it like? So the process in there. You try to make the app as easy as possible, where they don't have to figure it out, and it almost does it for them as you're going through. And part of that's good for us too, because you want to make sure the end customer gets their stuff. But if you make it easy for the driver to say where they left it, show the pictures and all that, you're saving everybody a lot of headache at the end of the day. I do think that episodic does make a lot of sense. We're not, obviously with the driver shortages, we've had a little bit of our share there, but not that bad, not that badly compared. Even with all the surges last year, we probably only, had a driver market in 20% of our zip codes. So, we're 21,000 plus zip codes that we go in. So 80% of that, call it 17,000. It was completely self-sustaining at whatever level it happened to be. And you think about DoorDash and their S1, they said they supported 17,600 zip codes. So it's harder to build, because you've got to have people paying attention a little bit all the time. But once it's built, it just has all that flexibility. You can do any size, you can do any distance, you can do any geography, and you can flex whenever you need to. And we've seen it. We've seen it in the airlines. We've seen it on Mother's Day and Valentine's Day with flowers and bakery stuff. We've seen it Black Friday. We've seen it Cyber Monday. Some of our best, on-time delivery rates have been on Black Friday and Cyber Monday, because everybody comes in, they already are sort of know that, okay, we're going to make a little bit more, and we're going to have the choice in the matter. And we haven't had a glitch with that.
Yeah. Well, nice. I didn't even have to ask you. One of my questions was going to be one of the best times and places to drive for Roadie, and you kind of just laid it all out there. So I appreciate that. And, I do think it is cool. I tweeted this out the other day. Clearly, I tweet a lot, most bad, some good. So if you're not following me on Twitter yet, go ahead and do that. But, I tweeted this out the other day, is that it is pretty cool in the gig economy. Obviously, there are a lot of positives and negatives to these jobs. But, for a lot of these services, especially in the delivery side, you can get signed up very quickly in kind of an ideal situation, maybe even same day. And a lot of services now allow for, basically instant pay or, quick pay. And you can literally sign up, cash out money. So even if, like you said, you don't work for a year, but you need $100, you can go out and make that. So I kind of am a little biased, but I feel like everyone should have something like this in their back pocket at their disposal.
Absolutely. And you're right. Like, you're asking about the best times to drive. The good thing about us having diversity across all these verticals, it's also the week before Memorial Day, Labor Day, and 4th of July, if you're in grocery or any of the major holidays before Thanksgiving. So if in all these different verticals, they have different Super Bowls of delivery. Yeah. That's what's cool about being in all of them. While one might fall down a little bit, the other one then rises up. And that's why even with the airlines sort of going down a good bit last year, we were able to not miss a beat and grow pretty well.
Very cool. Well, I like that term, Super Bowl of delivery. And I think that's a good note to end on, Mark. If folks want to learn more about what you're up to, what Roadie's up to, if they can want to sign up to drive or maybe try it out as a customer, where can they go and what should they do?
Absolutely. Go to roadie.com to sign up. Or if you're on Google, go to Google Play, download Roadie Driver. Same thing on the App Store. Take you probably 7 minutes to sign up, go through all the information, and same sort of background check process that you might have on others. And we would love to have you.
Very
Everybody
cool.
needs to be ready.
Everybody needs to be a roadie driver. Appreciate it, Mark. Take care.
Hey, take care. Thank you.